Smartphones and other gadgets deliver a wealth of information, but are they also causing a brain drain? Our cover story is reported by Sunday Morning senior contributor Ted Koppel.
50, 60 years ago, television was the threat. It would, we feared, rot our children's minds, our minds, diminishing our attention span, addicting millions to mindless drivel.
Huh? What?
And I think there are those who would say, and they were right. So what's different about today and the internet?
I think every technology that changes the way people live inspires exaggerated hopes and fears.
Technology critic Nicholas Carr has spent most of the past decade worrying and warning about the dangers of social media and the internet, posing the famous question, is Google making us stupid?
We've never had a technology like a smartphone, where it's with us all the time. So I think this is something new in human history. And I think we're starting to see the science, behavioral science, sociological science, that is pointing to how deeply this technology is affecting us because we're using it so intensely.
That's the focus of Byron Reeves' research. He's a professor, what they call a media psychologist at Stanford University. Professor Reeves developed a way to accurately track our digital lives. How do those 2 to 3 hours a day break down?
To view that 3 hours of content, on average, I am turning that phone on and off 300 times a day. And that's just the average. There are a lot of people that are turning it on and off 5, 6, 7, 800 times a day. So it's going on, going off for an average of 10 seconds.
You're making my brain hurt. What are you talking about?
Take a news story in a Sunday morning television program.
What a brilliant idea.
I don't know, how long does one last? 2 minutes, 10 minutes?
Oh, no, this one will probably last 9, 10 minutes.
Okay, so it lasts 10 minutes. I'll just talk about Stanford students for a second. If you put software on laptop computers and smartphones to measure how long they spent with any given segment of life that they attended to, how long they wrote their paper, how long they watched the news story, it's about 10 to 20 seconds.
But wait a second, I've got a 9-minute piece
Yes.
here. I want them to watch the whole damn thing.
Not going to do it, most likely. It's going to be atomized, and fragmented.
That sounds, Byron, like a formula for confusion.
It could be, but oftentimes we find it's done with a progression of screens that at least kind of makes sense to me. Because you might have said something that's really important to me in minute 2, and I want to get right to that.
What becomes important to us is the next new thing that comes along in a matter of seconds. That's what grabs our attention. And we begin to, not only do we begin to ignore the need to think deeply and quietly and contemplatively about things, but we begin to see that as a waste of time because it stops you from grabbing the next new bit of information.
Facebook was the first among the social media companies to turn those short and shallow attention bites into a hugely profitable business model. They realized that advertisers could just be given what amounts to a one-click roadmap to our brains, showing them, as we flitted from one subject to another, what we liked and didn't like. Meet Justin Rosenstein. Is it fair to describe you as the creator of the like button?
Co-inventor, yeah.
Co-inventor. Tell me what you were thinking of when you first co-invented.
The idea was, could we make it one click really easy for people to be able to share little bits of positivity and affirmation in the world?
And when did you first come to realize that there were, I don't know if you want to describe them as problems, complications?
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how it's played out as this kind of double-edged sword. I think it's very dangerous right now to have a business model in which the way that these companies make money is by selling people's attention to advertisers. So regardless of whether they have good or bad intentions, the financial incentives just lean you more and more toward trying to get people to stare at their phones. And as a result, we see that influencing the level of depth that we're able to think at. We see that influencing our politics.
A BuzzFeed analysis of top election stories on Facebook during the final 3 months of the 2016 presidential campaign confirms Rosenstein's fears. Fake election news stories from phony sites significantly outperformed stories from major news outlets like the New York Times, CBS News, and the Huffington Post. The notion that major news outlets see themselves as professional gatekeepers carries less and less weight.
The gatekeepers, the editorial gatekeepers, the journalistic gatekeepers have been overthrown. And I think there was a general sense that that was liberating in the early days of the web and the internet. We can do this ourselves. It will democratize media. And we now know that those enemies, the people we thought were our enemies, the gatekeepers, actually played a very valuable role.
I wish I could tell you that we're going to be able to stop all interference, but that just wouldn't be realistic.
While Facebook and Twitter are undertaking efforts to limit the spread of misinformation online, the fact remains that all these internet companies see themselves as distribution vehicles without any clear editorial responsibility. And in 1996, Congress actually passed legislation to that effect, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
They were simply a platform which information flowed on, so there was no responsibility to curate, police, or in any way review the information that appeared on your platform.
Senator Mark Warner is one of the tech industry's best informed and sternest critics.
Candidly, your companies know more about Americans in many ways than the United States government does.
What would happen if they began exercising real discipline over what goes out? And we're talking what? Billions of items a day.
Billions of items a day. And these companies would fight against that regulation tooth and nail.
The internet, Senator Warner reminds us, has been weaponized. Interference in our elections, threats to our infrastructure, undermining confidence in our institutions.
My fear is that we may be investing in the best 20th century planes, tanks, and guns when much of the conflict in the 21st century will be in the realm of misinformation, disinformation, and cyber warfare. And I'm not sure we're ready.
I think ultimately that's the question, is whether as a public we have the kind of sense of our democratic future to make hard choices about what we pay attention to, how we think about things, or whether we let the devices in the social media determine that for us.
You don't seriously think that we have that kind of discipline, do you?
I don't see any evidence of it.
Justin Rosenstein left Facebook some years ago. Today, he's the co-founder of Asana, a software company that enhances workplace productivity.
There's a lot of concerns that I have about that technology will continue to erode our attention span, make it harder for us to focus on important social issues, make it harder for us to think clearly, which is critical to having a functioning democracy. At the same time, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to reimagine these tools and redesign them in order to be a huge boon to civilization. The opportunity there is for us to become the most informed, most compassionate populace of all times, and to be the most functioning democracy of all times. But it's a real fork in the road. I worry that if we continue with business as usual, we run the risk of kind of walking off the cliff of civilization while staring at our phones.